Shelling at the airport, inmates breaking out of prison, rockets and heavy artillery destroying neighborhoods, leaving more than 25,000 people displaced, and killing at least 100. These were the scenes in the Libyan capital of Tripoli in September. In late August 2018, violence broke out when militias attacked a UN-backed government of national accord, accusing their armed security forces of corruption.
3 to 4 armed groups that had been providing security on the behalf of a UN-backed government had started to steal money from the public funds, had started to steal money from the Central Bank of Libya, and many groups, armed and non-armed, began to become upset about this and a fight to take Tripoli away from those groups.
The fighting lasted for a month before a ceasefire deal was signed, but this was just the latest round of fighting in the conflict-ridden North African country. But how did Libya reach this point?
I authorized the armed forces of the United States to begin a limited military action in Libya in support of an international effort to protect Libyan civilians. That action has now begun.
In October 2011, Libya's longtime ruler Muammar Gaddafi was overthrown and killed by NATO-backed forces, ending his 42 years rule of Libya. Less than a year later, Libyans elected the General National Congress, or GNC. It was entrusted with the responsibility of establishing a new constitution in 18 months, but it failed to meet the deadline, so soon the country descended into chaos again. In 2014, Libyans went to the polls again. This time, the people voted to replace the GNC with the House of Representatives, or HOR. But the elections were marred by violence and resulted in a low turnout, so the GNC disputed the result and refused to cede power. The GNC declared the newly elected HOR illegitimate, forcing it to eventually move to the eastern city of Tobruk, an ally with Gaddafi's former general Khalifa Haftar. Haftar has emerged as another center of power in eastern Libya after he launched Operation Dignity against the militias in the region. But the political divide created a power vacuum, which was exploited by Al-Qaeda-affiliated groups. It also paved the way for Daesh to establish a base in the city of Sirte, from where they attacked both the governments of Tripoli and Tobruk. The presence of Daesh was a concern for rival governments and the international community. This prompted the UN to conduct negotiations between the rival factions to enable a successor government to rule the country as a whole. This led to the formation of the UN-backed Government of National Accord, or GNA. But the GNA couldn't become the sole legitimate government, as both Haftar-backed HOR and factions within the GNC rejected it. So what's the situation in Libya now? With the absence of one central government exerting control, empowered militias deeply rooted along sectarian and tribal affiliations roam freely, posing a major security threat. Many of these militias are backed by foreign countries who are trying to maintain their interests in Libya. A recent UN report indicates that foreign governments are still providing financial and military support to different militias and rival factions, despite the presence of an international arms embargo since 2011. 4 years after Libya's civil war, the power balance has shifted in favor of General Haftar's Libyan National Army, or LNA. Today, the LNA is the strongest armed group in the country and is backing the HOR in Tobruk. It also controls most of the oil fields in the east of the country. The GNC, which fought to remain in power in 2014, no longer controls any relevant institutions. It was dissolved in 2016, but militias loyal to GNC are still eyeing power. The UN-backed government in Tripoli has not been able to unify Libyan powers and form a central government. It's struggling to exert control over a territory held by rival factions and has been unable to build a functioning army or security forces. Instead, it relies on militias for its protection. Divisions in the country helped armed groups, including Daesh, to gain a foothold in Libya. Although the presence of Daesh has significantly shrunk after the 2016 crackdown on militias, the group still poses a threat. Where does this leave the Libyan people? Libya has Africa's largest oil reserves, but heavy fighting since 2013 and the drop in international oil prices reduced the government's revenues from $53.2 billion in 2012 to $4.6 billion in 2016. While the production of crude oil has since revived, reaching 1 million barrels per day in 2018, the inflow of wealth is not reflected in the daily life of Libyans who are still struggling to meet basic